بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد فإن أحسن الكلام كلام الله وخير الهدى هدى محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وإن شر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار. So today is lesson number 53 in our series on this book Al-Uboodiyyah, which is Servitude by Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah. And in the previous lessons what we were discussing was the general topic was that if you do not distinguish between al-qadar, what Allah has decreed, and ash-shara', what Allah has legislated, if you do not distinguish between these two things, then this will be the starting point of tremendous misguidance. In fact, it can lead to the belief that everything is Allah and Allah is everything, right? Which means that you believe that the whole of what is the creation is in fact Allah Azza wa Jal, and so there's no distinction between, there is no creator and the created, right? So how you arrive from this point here where you do not distinguish, you say that whatever happens, Allah loves it. Whatever happens, Allah loves it. But that's not true. Whatever happens is Allah has decreed it for a wisdom, but He may or He may not like it and love it. Right? So if you don't make that distinction and you say everything that happens, Allah loves it because He willed it to happen, this now is the starting point of tremendous misguidance. And so that's what we've been discussing in the past maybe 2 or 3 lessons. And in the previous lesson, after discussing these issues, Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah was mentioning how that there are certain words that can be used, and these words can carry different types of meanings depending on the belief you have to begin with, right? So if you don't have any clarity in these issues, it means that you're going to give meanings to these words which can be totally false. And so the word that we were discussing is al-fana, right? So you hear this a lot among the Sufis. They speak about al-fana, which means al-fana, to perish. And so what we discussed in the previous lesson was 2 of the meanings of al-fana, right? The first meaning is that if you mean by al-fana, perish, meaning that I want every other desire that I have, I want it to perish, except the desire to do what is wajib and what is mustahab, right? To do what pleases Allah. If this is what you mean by the word al-fana, which means to perish, this is a correct meaning. This meaning is correct, right? Basically what you are saying is that I want to make sure that every other desire that I have, right? Maybe I have a desire to sin, I have a desire to steal, I have a desire to, do these vices, and I want all of these desires to perish, so that the only thing which is left is my desire to please Allah by doing what He commanded and keeping away from what He prohibited. If this is what you mean by al-fana, that everything perishes, this is a correct and sound meaning, right? And this is what obviously the Sahaba, the Salaf, what they were upon. This is what they meant, and this is what they practiced. and what they implemented in their lives. The second meaning of al-fana is more from the angle that I'm going to be so engrossed in worshipping Allah that I'm going to forget everything else, right? So the only thing I feel and I experience is my worship of my Lord and nothing else, right? So the only thing that I'm engaged in is, it's a bit like, it's like you have a lover and the one who is loved, right? And they become bonded in union in that love, right? So there's a type of unity which appears between the lover and the loved. And the consequence or the end result of this is that you can't tell one from the other, who is the lover and who is the loved, right? And the person, because he forgets everything else, you know, in his life, and he's just engrossed in this one thing, then this can lead to like a type of, basically like a type of deviation. It's a bit like the Shaykh gave the example of the mother of Musa alayhi salam, when she obviously the baby had been, she put the baby in the river, and then when she realized that the baby was actually in the household of Fir'aun and she saw it, you know, and the woman from the household of Fir'aun was trying to look for a woman to breastfeed, and she became so engrossed and so preoccupied in just fixated on her son Musa alayhi salam, that there was nothing else that was in her mind, right? It just totally preoccupied her mind. So in the same way, these people who speak of al-fana with this second meaning, it means that everything else is forgotten in their life, and the only thing they are preoccupied with is they've got no connection to the world or anything else. They're just engrossed in just worshipping, right? And so this is like really a type of you're kind of departing from moderation, and you're leaving the way of the companions, and you are kind of abstaining from the world to a degree that's blameworthy, right? And then the end result of this type of exaggeration, right, is gonna lead to bad outcomes, right? So it sounds good at the beginning, but where it's going to lead you is not praiseworthy and is not healthy. So this is a second meaning of al-fana. This is what we discussed in the previous two lessons. So today, this is where we start today's lesson number 53, and we are still discussing the second type, and the Shaykh says. So we'll start today's lesson from this point. The Shaykh says, وَكَذَلِكَ صار في شيوخ الصوفية من يعرض له من الفناء والسكر ما يضعف معه تمييزه حتى يقول في تلك الحال من الأقوال ما إذا صح عرف أنه غالط فيه. Right. So what he's saying here is that within this second understanding of al-fana, what happens to some of these people, especially amongst the Sufis, is they obviously are engaged in what they consider to be worship and devotion, and they become like almost like intoxicated, like as in they lose their faculties. And like, you know what the Sufis do, they sit in a room and they do these breathing exercises, and they say Allahu, and then, you know, they do different things, and eventually they enter into like a certain state of mind, right? And they believe that this is something that's spiritual and bringing them closer to Allah. They will kind of unite with Allah, and you know, they reach this state, and in that state they start saying things which they don't know the true realities of, whereby they lose like their ability to distinguish between what's right and what's wrong, right? And they could even be uttering statements of disbelief, which they don't know that's what they are saying. However, when they come back to their senses, basically, they realize that what I said was actually wrong, right? So he gives some names of some people. He says, كما يحكى نحو ذلك عن مثل أبي يزيد وأبي الحسن النوري وأبي بكر الشبلي وأمثالهم. Right, so these are people in the past, names of people in the past who are known for this type of stuff, and what's related from them, they are admitting that we said certain things that we realized that they were wrong. And then there are others, بخلاف أبي سليمان الداراني ومعروف القرخي وفضيل بن إياد بل وبخلاف الجنيد وأمثالهم. So ممن كانت عقولهم وتمييزهم يصحبهم في أحوالهم فلا يقعون في مثل هذا الفناء والسكر ونحوه. Right, so he's now saying there's another group of people. These are righteous people. They're righteous people. And they are the likes of Abu Sulaiman al-Darani, Ma'ruf al-Khurki, wal-Fudayl ibn Iyad, and famous al-Junaid. Right, these are all pious, righteous people who never entered into those states of intoxication. Why? Because they were following the Quran and the Sunnah. They weren't doing things in exaggeration. They weren't doing innovated acts of worship. They weren't engaging into that. But they were righteous. They were pious. They were preoccupied with worship, right? But they didn't enter into the type of excesses and the extremism, if you like, which those first group of people fell into. And for that reason, they never lost their ability to distinguish, right? They were always presence in mind. So the point that what Ibn Taymiyyah is mentioning here is that we know the first meaning of al-fana, that's sound and correct. The second meaning of al-fana, at the beginning, it sounds good. It sounds good, right? I want to focus only on worshipping Allah. I want to forget everything else. Like basically, you see the Christians have the monks, right? And they say that we got nothing to do with the world. We've renounced the world. We're going to be in a monastery and it's going to be, miles and miles away. It's going to be in, miles away from the city. We're going to be just stuck in this remote place, and all we're going to do morning and evening, day and night, was going to be, given to devotion, right? Like, in essence, that's what you're trying to say. You're going to completely be abstemious, refrain from the world, and you're only devoted to the one that you love, which here is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right, so when you start off with this initial premise, it sounds good. It sounds nice, it sounds good. But then what you realize is that unless you are someone who is the likes of Fudayl ibn Iyad, al-Junaid, and these people who are very strong in their understanding of the religion, they are intelligent and they are smart and they know the limits and they understand all these affairs, right? And they adhere to the Sunnah, strictly to the Sunnah, right? Unless you are from those people who are rare and exceptional, they're very small in number, then you are going to be prone to making mistakes and you're going to fall into huge errors later on. And that's what happened to some of these people, right? It happened to some of these people. And in contrast, these scholars and these people of righteousness, they were characters that were kind of like perfect, exceptional, in their hearts. They loved Allah, they sought only Allah, they sought only to worship Him, and they also had a great amount of knowledge already, right? Right? In other words, to do this type of thing, you need to have a great deal of knowledge of the religion. You have to be a scholar, and you have to be firmly grounded to enter into this type of level worship of Allah, and refraining from the world, and zuhud and things like that. So Ibn Taymiyyah is mentioning about these scholars like Al-Fudayl, Al-Junayd, وعندهم من سعة العلم والتمييز ما يشهدون الأمور على ما هي عليه. He says that these people have such knowledge and vast knowledge and the ability to at-tamyiz, make distinctions, that they are able to see things upon their actual realities. They're able to see things for what they actually are. And when they look at the creation, they can see that the whole of the creation is a witness that Allah is the creator, the maker, the mudabbir, the one who is the regulator of everything, right? They see tawheed in everything that they are basically observing, and they see realities for what they are. So when they look into the world and they gain knowledge of the world, that knowledge just strengthens the tawheed that they are already upon, right? It gives them even more ikhlas, it gives them even more sincerity in the religion, right? And worshipping Allah alone. It makes them even more firm, right? Can you see the difference between this group of scholars who not only do they worship Allah, but they also have knowledge of the world, and they see the signs of Allah in everything, right? So they're not blinded from reality, as opposed to the one who says, I'm going to lock myself up, I'm going to forget everybody and everything, I'm going to have no preoccupation with the world, I've got nothing to do with it, right? And I'm just going to be a worshipper, and I'm going to connect with my Lord, and he becomes oblivious to the actual signs of Allah, the wisdoms of Allah in creation. Like, he starts detaching himself until he no longer is able to take lessons from reality and see reality, right? Because obviously in reality, what we experience, what we see, what we observe around us, we are all the time, what's happening is that this is Allah Azza wa Jal doing things, decreeing things, guiding some people, misguiding other people, taking the living out of the dead, taking the dead out of the living. Like, this is Allah making tadbir of his creation, right? He is managing his creation. So when you observe and see all these things, you are being exposed to things which then strengthen what you are already upon of tawheed, iman, and it makes you even more sincere, right, in your worship. But if you want to just detach from everything, and all you know is just basically, I'm going to worship, right? And it's all like emotions and feelings, right? It's, I felt tremendous love today, I connected with my Lord, right? And then you're trying to develop this. This now is going to, although it starts from something what appears to be nice and good and righteous and pious, it starts off with something like that. What's going to happen over time is that, and especially when you are not grounded in knowledge and you don't have that strength of intellect, which some people have, then what's going to happen with you is that you are going to be led to kind of other things which are going to be a source of misguidance, right? And so that's what Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, he says that that this second type of al-fana, which they call fana ul-shuhud, is something which in its foundation, right, is yes, it's something that the Quran kind of calls to when it says, don't be distracted by the world, and the world is only temporary, and the world is just full of play and pastime, and yes, the Quran calls to that. Yes, that's true in the Quran. And what the Quran calls to is knowledge, iman, and proceeding upon knowledge, and the greatest of those is obviously Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who was the one who implemented this in the correct way, right? In the correct way, that is. And now this is an amazing point that Ibn Taymiyyah mentions. He shows the difference between the Messenger Muhammad sallallahu and between Musa alayhi salam. All right? So, our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu he says, وَنَبِيُّنَا alayhi salatu wasalam, إِمَامُ هَؤُلَا وَأَكْمَلُهُمْ. So our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu is the Imam of those like the companions and the Tabi'een, like Al-Fudayl, Al-Junayd, and those like very righteous, intelligent people. He said, وَلِهَذَا لَمَّا عُرِجَ بِهِ إِلَى السَّمَاوَاتِ وَعَايَنَ مَا هُنَالِكَ مِنَ الْآيَاتِ وَأُوحِيَ إِلَيْهِ مَا أُوحِيَ من أنواع المناجات أصبح فيهم وهو لم يتغير حاله ولا ظهر عليه ذلك. He says, when the Messenger of Allah sallallahu was taken on the Mi'raj to the heavens, and he was made to see what's obviously of the signs of Allah, and then revelation was given to him by Jibreel, and he had whatever communications he had. Whilst he was in this state and witnessing these signs, remember, he's seeing things that are from the hidden signs of Allah Azza wa Jal. Did he, nothing changed in terms of his physical state or being. Did he faint? Did he faint? Did he become overtaken with this extreme love or fear? Or did something happen to his constitution? No, it didn't. Right? It didn't. This shows the strength of like the tamyiz and the ability to keep one's composure, and the strength of the body to be able to handle seeing and observing such great, tremendous, with the vision of the eyes, the ayat of Allah Azza wa Jal. Yet nothing happened to him. Right? In contrast, بخلاف ما كان يظهر على موسى من التعشي صلى الله عليه وسلم أجمعين. Right? As opposed to what happened with Musa alayhi salam of where من التغشي, when he basically fell unconscious. And this is referring to when Musa alayhi salam, the mountain, by way of the mountain, Allah Azza wa Jal, because Musa alayhi salam asked him to reveal himself, and he said, you will not be able to see me, but he manifested some of his light to the mountain, and the mountain, perished. Right? It basically turned to dust. When Musa alayhi salam, when he saw this, he fell unconscious. And because of what he saw. This is mentioned in the Quran. And when he came back and gained his consciousness, he said, Subhanaka tubtu ilayka wa ana awwalul mu'minin. O my Lord, glorified be you, I repent to you and I'm the first of the believers. Look at the difference between Muhammad sallallahu and between Musa alayhi salam. Right? Where our Messenger sallallahu was shown the greatest of signs with the vision of the eyes, right, in the heavens. Yet he kept his composure, right? And he didn't swoon, he didn't faint, he didn't pass out, nothing like that. And here Musa alayhi salam, as he is obviously from the greatest of the messengers, and he passed out and then he regained his consciousness. The point being from this is to illustrate the same point as it relates to what the Sahaba were upon. The Sahaba, yes, they kept away from the world, and yes, they were pious and righteous, and yes, they worshipped Allah, but it was upon knowledge, sound knowledge of the Sharia. And similarly, the names that were mentioned, such as Abu Sulaiman al-Darani, Al-Fudayl, Al-Junayd, these are names of righteous people. And this type of al-fana, the second type of al-fana, right, which is to you know, to forget everything except Allah, it doesn't mean to like literally forget everything, right? It doesn't mean that. But it means that you have a sufficient understanding of the world that it mixes with your iman and then strengthens it, right? So let me show you the difference. Whereas someone who is like this will be standing in the prayer and he's hearing the reciter recite the prayer, and he hears ayat in which they are very powerful in meaning. He will grasp the meaning and he will take the benefit from it, and he will be able to apply that verse to the knowledge and insight he's gained from his experience in the world, right? Whereas one of these types of people here, the people that we are mentioning, he would be in the same prayer, listening to the same ayah, and he'll hear a verse, for example, right? And he'll hear a verse, and that verse will overwhelm him, and he'll fall down and he'll become unconscious. You understand? Right. Which of the two now is superior? Is it, oh, this guy is so pious, you know, all he has to do is just listen to a verse and, you know, he'll pass out and he's, you know, this is his piety. Is this correct? No, it's not. This is actually, this is like an inferior position to be in, right? Whereas the true person of resolve and strength and understanding in terms of knowledge, right, is the one who, you know, he doesn't pass out, right? He regains his composure, right? He gains in more certainty with what he's hearing. He's not overcome like with emotions, and right. So the point being, then, we can wrap all of this up. In fact, before we wrap all of this up, I just wanted to mention some of the comments of Sheikh Al-Fawzan on what we've discussed so far. So Sheikh Al-Fawzan says that, you know, this is what the Salaf were upon, right? The Salaf, they, you know, they are aware that you can start from something and it can lead you to something which is not praiseworthy. So for that reason, because they held fast to the Quran and to the Sunnah, they didn't fall into the mistakes of those other people, right? And at the beginning of what later became Sufism, the beginning part of it was something that in and of itself wasn't necessarily wrong. So the initial people, the initial like well-known pious people like Abu Sulaiman al-Darani, al-Fudayl ibn Iyad, al-Junaid, Ibrahim bin Adham, you know, Bishr al-Hafi, there's many other names, right? To which the Sufis ascribe to. These were righteous, pious people upon knowledge, right? But like we said, there's a danger in this second type of like al-fana, where you can, you know, step by step be led into, you know, something that eventually becomes deviation. And you really do need to have deep knowledge and deep understanding to be safe and secure, you know, in this particular field. Right. So this is the end of the second type or second meaning of al-fana, right? And we should be clear what that means now, right? The general lesson that we take from it is that the more you detach yourself from reality and the world and experience, then the more you are going to focus more on emotions rather than understanding the realities, right? And the more you are, you know, go by way of your emotions, right? Just like, you know, that there's only you and your Lord, which is true, and the only thing you are focusing on is just, you know, love and things like that. You know, you start losing your grip on the realities which are out there, to which you are supposed to be applying your knowledge of the religion, of the Quran, of the Sunnah. But you're just engrossed in worship, right? So it becomes all emotional. That's what it becomes basically, right? So that's the danger in that. This now brings us to the third meaning of the word al-fana. Al-fana. And the third meaning of al-fana here is what they call fana'ul wujud. Fana'ul wujud. And what this means is that the whole of existence perishes. All of existence perishes. What do they mean by this? Ibn Taymiyyah says, وَأَمَّا النَّوْءُ الثَّالِث مِمَّا قَدْ يُسَمَّى فَنَاءً فهو أن يشهد أن لا موجود إلا الله وأن وجود الخالق هو وجود المخلوق فلا فرق بين الرب والعباد وهذا فناء أهل الضلال والإلحاد الواقعين في الحلول والاتحاد. He says that this third type of fana is that you witness that there is nothing which exists except Allah, and that the existence of all of the creation is the same as the existence of Allah, and there's no difference between the Lord and the servant. There's no difference. So this is the fana. This is what they mean by perishing. This is the fana of the people of misguidance and atheism, those who fall into al-hulul wal-ittihad. Al-hulul means that you believe Allah enters into everything. Allah is in everything. And ittihad is you believe that Allah unites, Allah unites in things, right? He, like in a servant or in a tree or in a rock or whatever it might be, right? This is the saying of those types of people. So this obviously third type is the most severe type of misguidance, as Shaykh al-Fawzan says, and this is what we mentioned in previous lessons, where basically it means that Allah is everything, everything's Allah, there is no distinction between the creator and the created, so therefore it doesn't mean what you worship. You can worship whatever you like, you can worship this table, you can worship the chair, you can worship the wall, because Allah is everything, everything is Allah, then what you are doing is a valid act of worship. You are a person of Tawheed. Why is that? Because you are worshipping Allah, right? This is what they say, right? This is what the people of Tawheed do. They worship anything and everything because Allah is everything, right? So this is from the greatest kufr, disbelief and misguidance. And now that you, right? So now that you know the three meanings of al-fana, right? Sometimes certain statements can be made. Sometimes certain statements can be made where a person might be confused as to what's really intended, right? So Ibn Taymiyyah now gives us an example. He gives us an example to illustrate. For example, and this shows you how the Sufis fell into so many mistakes, right? Can you remember the second category of people? Yeah, the second category of people. Remember we said there were two types, yeah? The first type, like, Al-Fudayl ibn Iyad, Al-Junayd, these are deeply grounded, rooted scholars. They know what they're doing, right? As opposed to the others who are like fainting and this and whatever, right? Now imagine one of those righteous scholars, right? He makes a statement. He says, Ma ara ghayrullah. Or he says, La anzuru ila ghayrillah. Right? So imagine Al-Fudayl ibn Iyad or Al-Junayd or someone, right? He says, I do not see except Allah. I do not look at except Allah. He makes a statement. what does he mean by that? What does he mean by that, right? What does he mean by that? And if someone from the third group, the third category that we've just mentioned now, who say Allah is everything, everything's Allah, if he was to hear that, how would he interpret that? Do you understand? Right? So in the second category, the first group, Al-Fudail, Al-Junaid, and so on and so forth, what they mean by that, as Ibn Taymiyyah says, is فَمُرَادُهُمْ, their intent by this is مَا أَرَى رَبًّا غَيْرَهُ. What they mean by this is, I don't see a Lord, I don't believe in a Lord or see that there's any Lord other than Him. Right? I don't see there's any creator other than Him. I don't see that there's a mudabbir, a controller other than Him. I don't see there's a deity other than Him. Right? What they mean by this is, I don't look at other than Him loving that thing, or fearing that thing, or hoping in that thing. Right? This is what you mean. Right? When one of those people, those scholars says, I do not see except Allah. I am not seeing except Allah. Like what it means is that in what I am seeking, what I am pursuing, what I am loving, what I am fearing, what I am hoping in, right? I don't see anything except, not like with the eyes obviously, but in the sense of I don't see anything other than that which is deserving of my love, my fear, my hope, my devotion. This is what they mean. Right? He's speaking about what the heart is attached to. I don't see anything to which my heart can be attached to other than my Lord, Right? So, because obviously, whenever your heart is attached to anything, your heart then turns towards it, right? This we know from experience, right? You like food, you like drink, you like clothing, you like whatever. Your heart automatically starts seeking and turning to those things. So in the same way here, when the likes of these scholars say, Ma ara ghayr Allah, I do not see other than Allah, meaning my heart does not see and pursue and seek except Allah. Right? This is what those scholars mean. Right? This is what they mean. This is what they mean, that I do not turn to other than Allah. I don't turn to other than Allah. So, I don't turn to anything else, loving it, fearing it, hoping in it, So Ibn Taymiyyah is especially speaking about this meaning. And this then eventually leads us to, like the hadith. The hadith Qudsi, that whoever shows enmity to a slave of mine, then I will announce war against him. Right? And the hadith continues that, my servant, does not do anything more beloved to me than the obligations, and then he doesn't cease becoming closer and closer to me by way of the nawafil, until I become the hearing with which he hears, and the seeing with which he sees, and the hand with which he strikes, and the foot with which he walks. Right? So that hadith explains what is meant here, what is meant by these scholars when they say, I do not see other than Allah. It means that everything I do, everything my heart pursues and seeks and wants, is only the pleasure of Allah. And then my limbs will follow, right? My limbs will only do what Allah is pleased with, right? Everything that I'm doing I'm being guided by Allah Azza wa Jal, so that my hearing, my seeing, my hand, what I walk to, what I do with my hand, all of it is for the pleasure of Allah. This is what they mean by this statement. That you love what Allah loves, that you hate what Allah hates, that you be friends with those whom Allah loves, that you be friends with, that you have enmity with those whom Allah loves, that you have enmity, for whom Allah has enmity for, right? So you're doing all these things. This would be the correct interpretation of that statement if they said, I do not see except Allah. But if one of those people from the third category came along, and in his mind, in his belief, everything is Allah, Allah is in everything, There's no creation, no created, right? And then this person goes back and he goes into and he looks into the biographies of some of these earlier scholars, right? And he says, Fudail bin Iyad said, Ma'ara ghayr Allah. What's he going to interpret from that statement? He's going to wrongly think that Al-Fudail bin Iyad is speaking with wahdatul wujud, with the unity of existence, in which it is said, everything is Allah, Allah is everything. Do you understand? Right? This is how the Sufis got misguided, because they wrongly thought that some of these very evil, nasty doctrines that appeared later on, when they went and looked at many of the statements of the early righteous people, and they made statements like this, that I do not see except Allah, I do not seek except Allah, right? They wrongly thought, and they began to ascribe to these early righteous scholars and tabi'een, they began to ascribe their evil doctrines to them, right? Obviously it's because of their ignorance and their misunderstanding. So this is what Ibn Taymiyyah then says, that as for this third category, وَأَمَّا النَّوْءُ الثَّالِث وَهُوَ الْفَنَاء فِي الْمَوْجُودِ. الْفَنَاء فِي الْمَوْجُودِ. This is where whatever is in existence, it perishes, it all disappears, so that the only thing which is left is Allah. Meaning Allah is now everything. So I don't see you as a being, outside of Allah. You as a being outside of Allah have disappeared. All that's left is Allah. You understand? Right? This is what they are speaking of, right? Where existence disappears and it all becomes Allah. And Ibn Taymiyyah says, فَهُوَ تَحْقِيقُ آلِ فِرْعَوْنَ وَمَعْرِفَتُهُمْ وَتَوْحِيدُهُمْ كَالْقَرَامِطَ وَأَمْثَالِهِمْ. This belief now is the belief of what the people of Fir'aun, what they basically arrived at, and those who followed them, like the Qaramita, right? These are astray, misguided groups who basically came. Now, from this now, you should see clearly the three different meanings of Al-Fana, and Shaykh Al-Fawzan nicely summarizes each of these three types. He says, the first one, Al-Awwal, yusammunahu Fana'ul Maqsood. Fana'ul Maqsood, right? The first type of Al-Fana that we mentioned is called Fana'ul Maqsood, meaning it relates to the thing which you are seeking and you are desiring, right? So if you desire only the pleasure of Allah, then the pleasure of everything, it perishes and it goes, right? So you're not trying to please, you're not trying to please your friends, you're not trying to please your family, you're not looking for the pleasure of whoever it might be, you're looking for the pleasure of Allah, right? So therefore the only irada, the only desire or wish that you have in everything that you do is the pleasure of Allah, right? This meaning is correct. Fana'ul maqsood. This meaning is correct now. Nothing wrong with this at all, right? This is what we all ought to do, following the companions, following the tabi'een, right? This is the first one. This is the goodness that the prophets and the messengers were upon, which is that we do not seek except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The second is fana'u shuhud. Fana'u shuhud. Fana'u shahud, right? This means that whatever I am witnessing out there in the world, right, I no longer witness it. I no longer see it. I no longer observe it. Why? Because I'm stuck away in a room just worshipping Allah with my emotions and feelings. And that's all I know, right? I'm not interested in anything else of the world, right? This thing here, the starting point of it, if you are someone who is an alim with deep knowledge, with intelligence, sharp intelligence, and you're able to look at the world and benefit from that, and to, like in the sense that you're not tempted by the world, but you know its reality. And alongside that, you worship Allah and you are devoted to Allah, right? It's not like stuck in a room, isolated, completely oblivious, such that when you read the Quran, you don't have the experience from the world to relate it to the Quran, which then gives you firmness in your iman and gives you certainty, right? Rather, you're just the type of person who's going to basically, you hear a verse, your emotions are triggered, and you fall down, emotionally. You become unconscious because it's just overwhelming and it's overpowered you, right? And this now, people treat this wrongly to be as this is a sign of piety. It's not. This is a sign of weakness, right? So this is the type of thing that, the Sufis, this is what they use as a criterion that someone must be right. Do you understand? This is great, he's so pious, all he heard was Alif Lam Mim, and he was on the floor unconscious, right? And then they think this man has to be pious. He has to be, whatever he's doing is right. No, this is not a criterion. It's not a criterion. This is not what the Sahaba, this is not known in the Sahaba. This is not known from the Sahaba. This was unknown to them. This only happened afterwards amongst maybe some of the Tabi'een, right? So the point being that this second Fana'u Shahud, the starting point of it's good, it appears to be good, and only the most deeply rooted scholars are able to engage in that type of devotion and be safe. But other people, or most people, are going to go in a series of steps, and they're going to, maybe, they will be put to trial, basically. That's the second type, Fana'u Shahud. The third type, the second type is, as Shaykh Al-Fawzan says, where this person is not bothered about looking at other things which might benefit him or aid him in Allah's obedience. Do you understand? Like, for example, you might go out there and you might work. And if you work and you earn a halal living, that halal living is allowing you to do many acts of obedience, to feed your family, to support your parents, right? To feed your children, right? To use wealth to educate your children, right? All of this is obedience to Allah, right? So these people are like, I'm going to abstain from all of that, and I'm just going to be just devoted to Allah, right? So they like keep away from those things that would otherwise benefit them. So that's the second type. The third type is what we are discussing now, which is Fana'ul Wujud. Fana'ul Wujud, which is basically nothing exists except the existence of Allah. Only Allah exists. And, this is the people, the doctrine of the people of Wahdatul Wujud. And, all the creation becomes Allah. Allah is all the creation. And these people who are upon this doctrine, you know what they said? They said that when we read the Quran, they basically turn the Quran, they reverse it around. So they say that the greatest believer is Fir'aun. Why is Fir'aun the greatest believer? What's the reason? What's the reason? He said, why? It's because he said, فَقَالَ أَنَا رَبُّكُمُ الْأَعْلَى. He said, I am your Lord. And he also said, مَا عَلِمْتُ لَكُم مِّنْ إِلَهٍ غَيْرِي. I do not know of a Lord for you besides me. Meaning, he made himself into Allah. Which means that he was correct. Oh, sorry, he was partially correct. According to these people, the people of Wahdatul Wujud, they say Fir'aun was correct, like generally, because he knew Allah was within him, but he was still wrong because he limited Allah only to himself. He should have said the whole of creation is Allah. That's where he went wrong. Do you understand? Right? So that's what these people say. And they say Fir'aun was a muwahhid, but he just made this technical error. Right? His tawheed was like deficient. He should have said, I and the whole of creation is Allah. But he said instead, I am your Lord. Right? If he generalized, then he would have been free of any mistakes. And also, now you can understand what the meaning of tawheed is to these people. Tawheed means there's only one existence. There's only one existence. That's all there is. There's no creator. There is no created. There's only one existence which is eternal as well. Right? Which means that everything in existence, me, you, the table, the microphone, the cat, the dog, the sun, the moon, everything, all of it is one existence, all of it is Allah. Allah is in everything, everything is in Allah, there's no separation, and this, is now, strangely enough, and we'll finish on this point here. So we'll finish on this, but I just want to make a point here, which is that if you think about, because Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, he mentioned early on, this is the saying of the people of Ilhad, right? This is the saying of atheists. Where we've arrived at, which is the saying of the Sufis, the extremist Sufis, that Allah is everything, everything's Allah, there's only one existence. Well, this is no different to what the atheists are upon. That's exactly what the atheists are saying. The difference is only the terminology and the labels, right? Because an atheist basically is saying all that exists is just matter. It's always been there. It's always been there. And matter is eternal. And, they use words like, it's nature. It's the tabi'ah of things which explain how they are and why we see what we see. It's tabi'ah, right? It's because there's a property in an atom, there's a property in a molecule, there's a property in this, whatever, and that's how things are happening. And all there is just matter. It's been there forever. And, there's no creator, there's no created. It's just all eternal, right? What's the difference between that and between what these people are saying? Right? It's just the label only. You've just put the label of Allah upon this, and they've just put the label of, I don't know what label they put. They just call it matter, tabi'ah. They call it nature. They call it infinite energy, if you want to call it. I mean, all these physicists and these people, they have different words. Unlimited consciousness, infinite energy, tabi'ah, nature, whatever name you want to use. You're just applying a label to an idea, which is there's no creator and there's no created, right? And everything that's here has always been here. That's the atheist over there. And here you have the people of Wahdatul Wujud saying all that exists is Allah. There's no creator, no created. It's all one existence. It's always been there. And you just put the label Allah on top of that. There's no difference between you and the people of Fir'aun. You're one and the same thing, right? All you've done is proven that something is eternal. That's it. And that's why also, and we finish on this note inshallah, is like the people of Kalam, Ahlul Kalam, the people who use philosophy to try to prove Allah's existence and the universe had a beginning or whatever. The argument these people use, all it proves is that something is eternal. That's all it shows. And so by you using those arguments, you haven't even got past what Fir'aun was upon, or what the atheists of today are upon, let alone establishing Allah's Uboodiyyah. Understand? Like, you haven't proven there's a creator. All you've shown is there's something eternal which is present. Do you understand? Right? This is the way of the people of Kalam, Ahlul Kalam. And these people are found today. You will see them going to Hyde Park and other places, trying to debate with the atheists and trying to prove, using these arguments. and arguing with physicists and arguing with philosophers, and the only thing they're able to prove is to show, there's something eternal. But that's what Fir'aun believed, and that's what these atheists are believing. What's the difference? What have you established? Nothing. You haven't even established Allah's rububiyyah, let alone Allah's right to be worshipped alone, uluhiyyah, by way of this argument. You haven't gone beyond that, right? And in fact, this is a point that Ibn Taymiyyah himself actually makes about these people, about the Ahlul Kalam, that the kind of arguments you are using, these philosophical arguments, the Huduthul Ajsam, and so on and so forth, you are not going beyond just an eternal existence, which the atheist is not going to disagree with you. He's going to say, yes, I totally agree with you, there's an eternal existence. I just call it nature, or I call it unlimited potential, or I'll call it, infinite consciousness, or whatever. That's what it is to me. You're just calling it Allah. I'm calling it infinite consciousness. Understand? Right? So you can see how all of these topics now here, there's a convergence of like all these different topics, and what it shows is that we have to obviously we have to have understanding of these affairs and make sure that we're holding fast to the Quran and the Sunnah, and that when it comes to da'wah and when it comes to arguments and things like that, we are guided. We allow our reason to be guided by what has come in the Quran and the Sunnah, and obviously that's a whole other topic in itself. But inshallah, we'll stop on this note for today's lesson. And so, in short, what we've done is we've looked at like one example of a word. This is by no means the only example. There are many other words in terms where the same discussion can be had, where you can have different meanings to words, but some of them could be false, some of them could be correct, right? So al-fana, 3 types: fana'ul maqsood, fana'ul shahood, and fana'ul wujud, right? They all have different meanings, and we discussed some of those through the speech of Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah. And we can conclude today's lesson there, inshallah, and we'll continue with the rest of the discussion in the next lesson, inshallah. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, wa sallallahu ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in.